What the Tech is sponsored by Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audiobooks, with more than 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature. For a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew.
What the Tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. Of course, I'm joined by the very busy Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
I'm pretty good.
Are you having a good day?
No, I've had better days.
It's September's here. Technology's back. Everybody's talking about technology. You should be excited.
You're right. I should.
And today we have a special guest, a good friend of mine, a drinking buddy of mine, actually. I don't think there's been a time that we've gotten together and we have not had a drink. Mary Jo Foley. How you doing, Mary Jo?
I'm doing well.
That's not you. There you go. That's you. We got all new buttons here. We're pressing everything. It's a whole mess. We have you on today because there was a huge groundbreaking announcement late last night. Microsoft has acquired Nokia products and services, hardware and services. What is the mobility
business? I think
devices
and
services.
Pretty much the stuff that we really care about, the big stuff.
Yeah.
But other than devices and services, what does Nokia do exactly?
What do they do?
Because I saw that announcement. They're saying devices and services, and I'm like, they have devices, they have services.
Devices encompasses mobile phones, feature phones like the Asha line, smartphones like the Lumia. They have a tablet that is going to be announced, or was going to be announced. I assume still will be announced as soon as this month. And that's most of what Microsoft bought outright, I would say, right? Is that most of it, or were there patents in there?
Yeah, there were patents too. They bought 8,500 design patents that have to do with mostly how phones are designed.
Mm-hmm.
So they bought that.
Yep.
And then they did a bunch of cross-patent licensing kind of things with Nokia. So the whole investment was $5 billion for the devices and services, and another $2 billion for the licensing of the mobile patents.
Yeah, it was like they went shopping for a smartphone and decided to buy it all up front rather than go on the monthly plan.
There's a funny video image going around how Bill Gates says, buy me, I need a new Nokia, and Ballmer goes and buys the entire company.
Right. Yeah. Nice.
I have so many questions.
They do other things, right? So Nokia owns the HERE mapping solutions, which are generally excellent. They're not selling that to Microsoft, but they are providing them with a license to use that for X number of years and then perhaps perpetually across all of their products. And so I expect to see HERE maps integrated into Windows Phone, and wherever else that makes sense. They have a networking, the Siemens business, which I don't know very much about. Which they're also keeping, and what was the other part they're keeping? Just the patents they're licensing. I guess they're
keeping like 56,000 employees, and the other 32,000 go to Microsoft. So they still have a lot. Oh yeah, the Nokia CTO office, which is their chief technology office. That's where all their patents are. So they're going to keep licensing patents, not just to Microsoft, but to other companies in the wireless.
But there were two deals going on, right? One was the purchase of the company, and then the other one was the licensing
of existing of patents that Nokia is holding on to.
Yeah, and then the $2 billion is
that's the licensing.
It's
of
licensing.
Patents to Microsoft.
Okay, I thought it was separate for the patents that they acquired the patents.
Yeah,
this is interesting because a lot of people are questioning. Well, what did they need to purchase Nokia at this point, because they have such a close relationship, and Nokia pretty much is only making Windows phones right now? Was it a necessity for Microsoft to purchase Nokia? In my opinion, they purchased Nokia because Nokia's future is at risk here, not necessarily Microsoft.
I think that's the right way to put it, that events forced their hand. That if Nokia was a healthy business making money on every handset they sold, they probably wouldn't have to do this. They had a great relationship with Nokia to begin with. I suspect, I don't know if we'll ever hear the real truth of this, but I suspect something was happening where, they've been looking at the math of it and realized that this is not sustainable and we're going to need to partner with somebody. And of course, at that point, Microsoft has to swoop in and do this because, you don't want them partnering with BlackBerry or with some Android firm or whatever it is.
I mean, I can't see them ever doing that anyway, but
Well,
Yeah, there was some speculation today, right? That some analysts who, I don't know how clued in they are actually about what's going on, but they were saying the reason Microsoft had to do it right away was because Nokia was thinking about going Android. I have no knowledge as to whether that's true or why that would be the case, because I'm not sure they could have actually made more money doing Android, right? I mean, the only one really making money on Android is Samsung. So I don't know.
Well, the long-term outcome of this,
threat,
though.
The
long-term outcome of this, Paul, and we're talking about the hardware that they're making. Last week on the show, I kind of went on this rant about how I would love to see, and this is not a realistic thing, and obviously people are going to tell me I'm an idiot for this, but I would love to see Microsoft say, you know what, screw you OEMs, you've messed it up for us. You're not putting in good hardware in these computers that you're selling. We're going to start making our own hardware. Nokia as a partner would be great. That? What?
Give it away.
Give what away?
Just give it away, because I don't know what they are making per handset to other OEMs. A lot of people have thrown away this little $10 a month figure that they were making off of Nokia, but that was a net number. In other words, there were exchanges of payments going back and forth, and so Nokia was paying some unknown amount for the Windows Phone license. I believe Nokia was also paying an unknown amount to license Microsoft patents. Microsoft, in turn, was paying a licensing fee to Nokia because they had that intellectual property, some of which actually they still do. And Microsoft was making something that I'll call platform payments because of their special deal that they got into. Yeah. The net result was that Microsoft was receiving $10 per handset that Nokia sold. That's how they worked that out. If Nokia sold 7.4 million handsets in the last quarter, that means Microsoft made $74 million on Nokia's handsets overall. And that's not big bucks for a company like Microsoft. The other OEMs sell a lot fewer Windows phones, 20%, right? So I can't do math off the top of my head, but we'll just say, roughly speaking, less than 2 million units in the last quarter. If they're making, I don't know, $30 to $40 per handset, if that's what they're charging, to me, that's an insane amount of money. And that the only way they can have a healthy ecosystem now, I think, would be to forgo that relatively small amount of money and license it for free, just like Google does with Android, and build market share that way. I just don't see the rational point of licensing something that right now I think nobody wants.
Well, I mean, really, there's only one. There's HTC that's only making it other than Nokia, but does HTC continue making Windows phones? Because they're not really making money off of a Windows phone. They're making the money off, an Android phone, if that.
Well, actually, HTC isn't making money, if anything, which I think is
if they were to make money from something, they're making it off of one phone, the HTC One. But
so actually, before we get to that, though, Mary Jo, is my assessment of that roughly correct?
Yeah,
how I see the
thing? I mean, the tricky part here is who was actually paying Microsoft a licensing fee for the operating system, right?
Right.
So if 80% of phones were sold to Nokia was paying them $10 a phone. Okay. Then the other remaining 20%, we don't know how much they were paying. They might have been paying a slightly higher amount. There was $15 rumored at one point for how much OEMs were charged. Okay. Then they all pay Microsoft patent royalties on top of that for Android. And that's something that gets factored into Microsoft's total, right? When they talk about what they make off of Windows Phone, they throw the Android patent licensing royalties in there too. So it kind of makes it hard to separate all this out. But I think they should, especially if there's only one OEM left, which would be Nokia. They wouldn't really charge anything to them anymore for the phone OS, right?
I don't know how they're calculating this. I mean,
I don't think HTC is going to keep making phones. They haven't said they're not, but why would you if you're HTC, right?
Well, what if it was free? What if the deal was HTC can come out with a handset like the HTC One, 0.2, or whatever they call the next one. And because it's the same underlying hardware, they can just say, here's a Windows Phone version and here's an Android version, and it doesn't cost them anything. Well, I mean, obviously there's always some cost, but if you don't have to factor in the cost of that OS license, it seems like maybe that becomes affordable enough where it might make sense.
But they still have to put the phone out and market the phone, and if nobody's buying it, they're still losing money on it.
Yeah.
I would love to see
Maybe,
what their
but-
loss is on a Windows phone. You know, is HTC actually making some sort of profit, or is it a loss for them to actually keep putting it out?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
I don't know.
question.
I would love to
I don't
see that
know.
number. And they're good phones. But
Yeah,
you
I
go
love
into
mine.
you go into a Verizon or AT&T, Verizon especially. I mean, I went in there the other day, and it's all Android phones. The iPhone is secondary, and a Windows phone is God knows where they're putting it in placement. They're not even discussing it, and
Right.
that's
Oh,
a
by the way,
problem.
I should. You just reminded me. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but my daughter is getting her first smartphone, and everyone else in my family is on Verizon, and so they looked at what was available, and she picked. And I mean, she picked this. I had literally no say over this.
A
I found
BlackBerry.
out after the fact. No, yeah, no, I would disown my daughter if she got that. No, she picked the HTC 8X, the Windows Phone.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's what I have too. I still use
Yeah.
mine and still like it. I don't know. If you're HTC though, and Microsoft owns Nokia, it's the exact same argument if you're in the tablet space, right? If Microsoft's building Surface tablets, why are you as an OEM still going to build Surface tablets? I mean, your alternatives are pretty crappy, to be honest. I mean, you could build a Linux tablet or an Android tablet, right?
That's for sure. Yeah,
But how about an OS2 tablet? No.
finally. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of I feel like it would make you feel disincented, right, to build something when Microsoft's got all the advantage. They know what's coming. They get the OS first, even if they say they don't. They're going to get it first. They know where they're planning to add features first, and you're just another OEM. But their own division, I'm sure, gets early access to that information.
I mean,
So
Paul's going to hate me doing this, but let's draw a direct comparison between what Google did with Motorola Mobility and what Microsoft could potentially do with Nokia. Google, yes,
Andrew.
I know. I'm sorry.
Andrew.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
But Google kind of has had them for over a year. They've dropped the ball. They haven't really done much. As far as we see right now, they've had only, I think, one phone that they've controlled, and the phone is not that great. There's been really no advantage for Motorola to be with Google. I hope this is not the same thing where, we can't upset the other OEMs by doing this, by other OEMs being HTC. We're just going to put Nokia as a secondary thing. I can't see them doing it, but they could learn something from this.
They have a model with the Surface that they can follow. It's I think it's pretty clear cut. The only thing, there's actually a bigger problem in the Windows Phone space than there was and is in the Surface, PC world, because at the time when Microsoft started doing Surface, everyone was talking about how they're competing with the very businesses that got them to be successful over the previous 20 years and all that kind of stuff. Microsoft only makes one size device on the Surface end right now. I mean, eventually they'll have two, and maybe down the road they'll have 3, 4, whatever. But as of today, if you don't want a 10.6-inch tablet, well, that's all Microsoft offers.
Yeah.
So your choices elsewhere are where you're going to get bigger screens, smaller screens, desktop PCs, actual laptops and Ultrabooks and all these other kinds of devices. On the Windows Phone side, Nokia makes a wide range of device types, and soon will make even more. Right? They've got that phablet coming out. There's talk about they are coming out with a Windows RT based tablet. There's a lot less incentive on the phone side because A, the market is so tiny, and B, there's less of a chance to differentiate there. I mean, all of a sudden you've got this, the company that's making it now, which is Microsoft / Nokia. Does it all.
But they don't. I mean, they don't. Does Microsoft need another company to make a Windows Phone? I don't think it's necessary for them. I actually prefer Nokia being the only one out there, and there's conformity. There's overall, there's consistency all across the devices. You know that you're getting a premium device when you're buying a Nokia Windows Phone. I actually, to me, it's not a big of a deal compared to what another OEM, let's say in the laptop market, if Microsoft said, forget about Asus, you're not making any more devices for us.
Right. If they're going to do that to anyone, they should do that to Acer. But yeah, I see your point.
Listen, again, my crazy thing, I think they should do that to all of them. I think they should
Well,
start making their own phones.
Okay, so as much as I do like the Surface devices from a build quality standpoint, I mean, the problem with them, as I just said, is that there's only, it's one size fits all. And this size is not okay with me. And that's the problem. If Microsoft made hardware like this that spanned the ranges of device types, I mean, yeah, they could just be the next Apple for all I care. This thing is beautiful, but they need more choice, and right now they don't have a lot of that.
MJ brought up an interesting point. They said if Nokia is putting out these RTs, why would an OEM be inclined to make an RT device or a Windows tablet device if this is your premium device? I think they could, Nokia becoming the flagship and Nokia being their device, I think it would encourage the OEMs to say, you know what, we got to make better devices than them. We got to give more to them.
Right.
But who knows if they're going to do that, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. There's a lot of problems here.
There's a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So
That's one of them.
This comes at an interesting time. I mean, Ballmer's stepping down. The CEO of Nokia stepped down. What do you see happening now with? There's a lot of stuff changing, obviously, and this is Microsoft's attempt at becoming a different Microsoft. You know, post PC era Microsoft.
At some point, I wish Microsoft would just be what it was going to be. I mean, they've been talking about this for over a year now, and it seems like we're in this weird holding pattern where it's like, yeah, we're going to be this new kind of business. Yeah, we're going to be this new kind of business. Look, now we've restructured. We're going to be this new kind of business. Oh, look, we got rid of our CEO. We're going to be this new kind of business. Like, at some point, they just need to be that business. And the upheaval stuff is getting a little tiring, at least from me. But I would imagine inside at Microsoft, it must be even worse, right? I mean, I know for a fact, for example, that the Windows team, which is in the midst of its own transformation, is kind of in a holding pattern right now because they don't know who their boss is or who their boss is going to be or whether the new boss of the whole company is going to want to go ahead with the strategy that they're already on. And, I think this is going to have a negative effect overall until it gets straightened out, and in many ways it may resemble that trustworthy computing initiative where they shut everything down for months at a time just to look for code exploit potential in all of their code. And it's starting to feel like that. I'm nervous about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you on this because I feel like now we're in this weird holding pattern, right? Microsoft was on a track to do a version of Windows every year, right? And they just finished 8.1 and they're now supposedly, you would think, on to 8.2. But because of what's happening right now with the reorg, new CEO coming in who may or may not want to stick with this reorg. Now you've got Nokia thrown in the mix. Terry Myerson's heading up this cross OS division. You've got to think they're taking a pause, right? And they're saying, wait, we got to wait and see where all these pieces land. But they don't have time to do that, right? If you're going to keep doing an OS every year, you don't have time to sit there and wait, right?
Yeah. This is going to sound cynical, but I actually believe that the Windows team was not going to deliver on another release a year from now, and that this gives them their convenient out where they can say, well, we had to deal with all that, the upheaval and everything. So, maybe this one will be 2 years or something. Like I'm really nervous about the effects that are going to cascade out of this.
Well, tell me, what do you think is going to happen because of this? Give me your prediction for the next, couple months.
Jeez, I'm awful at predictions. I mean, I do think this will pass the regulatory muster. I do think they will migrate 30-something thousand employees from Nokia into the Windows Phone organization. I find it hard to believe that Microsoft won't be forced to have some kind of layoffs. This company was already too big to begin with, and now they have 30,000 more employees.
I mean, and now the rumors are heightening even more about Stephen Elop coming in as a CEO.
Yeah, the CEO, Mary Jo and I both have theories about that. I mean, I don't feel certainty about anything from the CEO perspective. But yeah, I mean, this stuff all needs to be decided because who is where and what they decide to do, whether the CEO has the backing of the board to do something completely new and different or must follow the course or whatever happens. Yeah, I mean, the next couple of months are going to be kind of messy.
Now, let me ask MJ, do you think Stephen Elop would be a good candidate for CEO of Microsoft? I mean, in my opinion, he ran a failing company.
Yeah, I don't think he would be a good CEO for a single Microsoft if Microsoft stays together. He did, to his credit, he did work at Microsoft for 2 years. He ran a business that kind of crossed enterprise and consumer. He ran the business systems division. So that was like Office, Exchange, Link, Unified Communications, all that stuff. So he knows that part of the business. He knows services. He obviously knows mobile since he went to Nokia and basically tried to help them turn around. But I get the feeling they still are probably, and this is just based on like idle talk I've heard, but still looking outside the company, and not just outside to a former Microsoft employee to come in and be the CEO, but to get somebody totally outside who's going to bring fresher, newer perspective, and doesn't really have all the Microsoft history and the Microsoft baggage. So I think that's what they're going to do. But that said, if you look back at Microsoft, anytime they brought in outsiders, like people like Ray Ozzie and others, they don't last very long at the company because you really need to be grounded in Microsoft to really understand all the machinations there. So I think they're going to go way outside, but if they don't, he might make a good choice. The other name that keeps coming up to the front for the new CEO is Satya Nadella, who runs the services, cloud services and enterprise business at Microsoft right now. Or Tony Bates, who runs Skype and who did run Skype. Now he's running evangelism and acquisitions, I think. So either of those two could be good too.
It's going to be hard for them to kind of pick someone from the outside that...
I know.
I think Microsoft is a company where, and Apple too, and all these companies that have matured to the point that they have this kind of culture with their company. When you bring someone from the outside, how are they going to fit in, and do they really want to shake things up? We spoke about
not just fit in, but actually change the company. Can you imagine having standing in front of Bill Gates and saying, "Yeah, we really need to change this. It's serious. It's obvious." And Gates just says, "Yeah, that's cute. We're not doing that."
And your blog last week,
and that's the problem.
In your blog last week about Ballmer and his reign at Microsoft, he couldn't do a huge shakeup. Why would he? Right. They were so successful with certain divisions. Why would he shake it up? And people look at him as that he sat there and he just continued Bill Gates' vision.
That's what Tim Cook is doing now at Apple. You can't. It's unavoidable. It's not a character flaw. You're generating money, at an incredible and record pace. I mean, you're not going to stick a wrench in that because you see some future need to move to devices and services or whatever the vision is. I mean. It's easy on the outside to say, Microsoft, you got to move more quickly. You got to get into online services. You got to adopt the internet. You got to get mobile devices going. Why aren't you doing this? The reason is Windows Office Server generate several tens of billions of dollars of revenue every single quarter.
You're not going to risk breaking it. Yeah. I mean, and the entire week, every blog keeps saying, is the next Microsoft CEO going to be the Steve Jobs of, Microsoft? Are they going to come back? First of all, that would be a disaster for them.
Right.
Steve Jobs came and he shook up Apple because they were dead. There was nothing. They literally had a couple months of revenue left to kind of survive. You have to throw a Hail Mary pass and say, we're going to start all over again. When you're a Microsoft and you have billions in revenue coming.
You can only do that when you're failing.
Microsoft is not failing.
Right, that's the problem. Not only are they not failing, they're incredibly successful. So, you don't break up successful stuff so you can do something else better. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. There was I actually heard this in an audiobook, but there's a line from the book Dracula that says the dead travel fast. And it's actually a line from a poem from the 18th century. Not that matters, but it's that's what it is. When you are facing death. That's when things like today happened, because Nokia, I think, was facing death. It's when Steve Jobs can happen at Apple. The Apple of the 1990s wasn't facing death, so it went through a bunch of stupidity before it could get to the point where it could make those changes, and it almost died. The Microsoft of today is a far, far cry from that. I mean, they are generating tons and tons of money, and that's why I think people who call for breaking the company up into a bunch of businesses might have the right idea, because I don't think there's any way under the current structure to actually fix those things that are wrong with Microsoft, because the rest of it's too successful.
Listen, best case scenario. Go ahead. Sorry, MJ.
It was interesting on the analyst call they did today, talking about the announcement that they kept Ballmer and Terry Myerson and Amy Hood, who's the CFO. They kept making the case that we can't break Microsoft up. We need to have all of this be a unified vision, right? We need to be in devices. We need to be in enterprise services because they're all interleaved. And they kept making that comment over and over in different ways because Wall
I
Street
feel
wants
like
them to do this.
I feel like I need to debunk this because
Okay.
in your interview with Steve Ballmer, I felt like he gave a very impassioned and logical defense of you don't just do consumer email, you do email. And when you do email, you can do consumer email and business email. But email is an excellent example of where Microsoft doesn't have any synergy at all across consumer and business products. Outlook.com shares no infrastructure, no technology, no user interface at all with Exchange Online and Office 365. If either one of those products is so good, why aren't they using it with the other? Why isn't Outlook.com a simple version of Exchange Online? Why isn't Exchange Online a more professional, feature-rich, whatever version of Outlook.com?
Okay, why isn't it? Why isn't it?
All they did, all that Microsoft did, and this is the central. And by the way, I'm using one example. It may be a little unfair, but all this really does is prove my point, which is that this company is too big and too complex, and they have two huge teams of people redoing the same stuff over and over again on both. Even right down to features. Even like actual individual features, where all of a sudden now you can buy storage on Office 365 just like you could on SkyDrive, a year ago, and now you can do this over here that used to be able to do. Like, people will always use the two, and then they'll say, "I like this feature over here. How come it's not over here? And I like this feature over here. Why is it not over here?"
Yep.
There's no synergy. They're just doing it twice. Microsoft's so big they can just do it twice. And that's not that's the opposite of what he was claiming.
Yeah, you know what I think they are thinking though. I think they think most people, not the people who listen to this kind of a podcast, but like the average person doesn't know the difference between Outlook and Outlook.com. They don't.
Yeah.
I don't think the average person knows the difference between Google and Outlook.
They don't. By the way, the average person doesn't know the difference between Windows and Office. But
right, true.
Please, yeah.
But I think That's why Microsoft called Hotmail when they redid it Outlook.com. They're like, you know what?
Right.
We're just going to say we have Outlook everywhere, and some people will know it's not the same thing, but most won't.
I also think the name Hotmail was synonymous with spam and it's like a throwaway email address for many people.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the Outlook brand is brilliant. I can tell you my wife's and I always bring up my wife's family because they're not really techie, and my family doesn't even use a computer. They're like in the Stone Age. But her grandfather, which is in his 80s, signed up for an Outlook email address because he knows Outlook.
Because he knows Outlook, yeah.
And he signed up for an Outlook email address.
So there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, other than the kind of implicit deception in this, because Outlook.com has nothing to do with Outlook.
Right.
And sometimes they'll call Outlook.com Outlook. I mean, it's really kind of nuts.
It's true. Windows is another good example, right? You hear Microsoft saying one Windows, and Windows runs on the phone. It's actually a different operating system, right? But the average person, do they know that? No. So I think that, when they talk about these synergies, it's as much just in public perception as it is actually in the
I'm sure it's a vision and a dream, right? I'm sure it's a goal. Somebody on Twitter, I apologize if you're listening that I don't remember your name, but somebody called out something that I quoted from the press conference today where someone had said the goal here is to get developers to be able to write one app that runs on phone, on tablet, on Windows PCs, and on Xbox One, which is one of those things like you say that and it sounds, that's a great idea. And then he said, why would I want the same app on all four of those things? Those things are not the same thing, right? I mean, obviously what you really want is native apps or even HTML apps that adapt to the device, that are, unique to the strengths of the device, to the presentation style of the device, to the size of the screen, whatever it may be. And I'm sure that's really what they're shooting for. But it is a good point because a lot of the things that these guys say on the surface, you kind of nod your head and, that's a good idea. It's like, huh. I'm actually not sure that is a good idea.
Yeah.
We got to take a little break, Paul.
Okay.
But when we come back, I do want to talk about, especially in the mobile side and the Windows side, because MJ's here and I want to get her input on this, what Microsoft could do to kind of rebuild their user confidence, their consumer confidence. Because if one thing, we brought up Microsoft is definitely not failing, and they're not. It's not this company that's hemorrhaging billions of dollars. But I do feel that in one scenario, they are suffering, and that's consumer confidence.
Yep.
The average consumer with Windows 8 with a laptop. So I want to talk about that a little bit also. And of course, we're going to continue this Nokia stuff. But Paul, before we do, it's that time of the show. I want to talk about Audible. Audible is a great sponsor of ours. You can get a free audiobook by going to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. I don't know why it's still Andrew. It should be Paul. Because it should be something else. Audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. Get a free audiobook by going there. Over 150,000 titles to choose from. I'm a big Audible fan. My wife is a big Audible fan. Paul, humongous Audible fan. I'm sure MJ's a huge Audible fan.
Yeah.
But Paul does the picks here because you are always finding something new. You're always looking for a new book. What is your Audible pick this week?
You'll enjoy this. I have two picks. I've not read either one of them, but I've actually purchased both of these. But I walk around the neighborhood and I listen to Audible books. And yesterday I was rescuing a toad from a flood, and this guy came up to me with his two dogs. And I in the course of my walking around the neighborhood, I've met every dog in the neighborhood.
Wait a minute, you were rescuing a toad from a flood?
Yes.
Okay.
Clearly,
just another day at the
clearly struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy comes up, and of course I'm thinking he's wondering what the hell I'm doing, because I'm sure it looks suspicious from his angle. But I explained to him I was rescuing the toad, and he showed no interest in the toad at all. He never even looked at it. He said, "Are you listening to Audible books?" Because I had my headphones on, and I said, "Yeah, I am actually." And he goes, "What kind of books do you listen to?" And I said, "Actually, recently I've been listening to a lot of Stephen King short stories, stuff like that." I have no idea who this guy is. And he says, "I have two recommendations for you."
Just a random guy giving you an Audible pick.
Yeah. Yep, two of them he gave me.
Two, wow.
So the first, I'll give you the second one first. The second one, he said John Muir. He says, the naturalist from like 100 years ago when he first went out west to California. I guess he wrote like kind of diary-like stories, and some of them are available as short stories. And so I got the one I think he was talking about, which is called My First Summer in the Sierra. It's like 6 hours long. It's I listened to just the beginning of it. I have one book I need to finish before I get to this one, but it actually looks pretty awesome. So that actually looked like a good pick. But the first one he recommended to me, I was like, "You have got to be kidding me!" Like I thought it was. I got to find my wish list because this one's on my wish list. I just thought it sounded so crazy. There's a series of books by a guy named Spencer Quinn that all have they're all of them have dog titles that are takeoffs on famous phrases. So this one's called Dog on It, like dog on it. And they're mystery stories about a detective who has a dog, and they're told from the perspective of the dog.
Brilliant.
I'm like looking
that.
at this guy like he's a crazy person. And when I got home, I looked it up and I listened to some of the experts and I read the reviews. And I have to say, like, these books are actually really highly rated and they sound pretty excellent. And it's got kind of dog humor. Like it's like these guys were meeting for, an hour and, he's confused why no one has smelled anyone yet. And, it's like all this kind of dog stuff. I don't know. It sounds pretty good. So anyway, the first book in the series is called not Dog on It, but like Dog on It.
Is it done in like a Scooby-Doo type of voice?
No. It's apparently they're based. I mean, apparently they're very serious. Like they're and supposedly good stories.
I love that.
So yeah, I mean that one's a little further down my list, but yeah, I'll be listening to it soon. Anyway,
very, very cool. Audible.com. Get a free audiobook by going to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. Over 150,000 titles to choose from, so they got something for everybody. I want to thank Audible for supporting What the Tech.
So before we get to the next thing, one thing Mary Jo I think wants to tell this story too is how I found out about this Nokia thing, because this morning I actually got up early because I had all this work-related stuff to do, and I wanted to get it in. The company I work for is in Colorado, so I figured if I got most of this stuff done for 10, 11 o'clock in the morning my time, I'd be all set. And so, I'm in the kitchen, I'm making breakfast, I'm reading the paper on the Kindle, and I'm talking to my wife. And for some reason, I'm finding this crazy series of things in the news that are jump-starting these conversations with my wife. And I think I sat there for an hour. And I had just finally made it to the business section of the paper. And my wife was saying something, and I clicked forward to go to the second page of the business section, and the headline said something like Microsoft to buy Nokia in $7.2 billion deal or whatever. And I'm staring at the screen like this. I'm like, what? it was almost like a dream. Like this was not. It was just inconceivable that I had found out in such a fashion. You know what I mean? And my wife is looking at me like, hello.
You're not giving any
She's
kind
like,
of
what are you
answer.
doing? I'm like, I'm just staring at it. I have no idea what she said. And I'm like, can you hold on for a second? And I kind of clicked into it and I was like, I gotta go. Like I just couldn't believe it. Just made no sense. Like and what I found out later was that Steven Banker, the guy from the Netherlands that I did the home swap with, and then also a guy from Microsoft, both actually called me last night in the middle of the night to tell me that this had happened. But I don't sleep next to a phone. Like in my bedroom, I don't have a phone. I don't bring my smartphone with me when I go to bed. I'm not that needy from a technology perspective. But there was no way for these people to reach me. But people actually tried to, get in touch with me overnight as well. And it's just a cocoon of stupidity.
I thought about calling you when I finally found out in the middle of the night.
See, that would be
went to
okay. It's
sleep.
just that you would never
Yeah.
reach me. That's
I
the
went to
problem.
sleep at like 11:30, and right after I went to sleep is when this was announced, and no one called me. And Microsoft sent me a note later and said, "Sorry, we meant to call you. We forgot." So at 2 a.m., a friend of mine called me. And what's really funny is this friend is the very same person who called me in 2007 when Microsoft bid to buy Yahoo and woke me up at 4 a.m. that time to tell me, hey, Microsoft just bid on Yahoo. This time I answered the phone and it was like, hey, did you see the news? And I'm like, no, I'm asleep. And they said,
Yeah, no, I'm not clairvoyant. Sorry.
I'm
No.
like, they're like, no, Microsoft just bought Nokia. And I'm like, oh, brother, please. And the person said, no, really. And so I had to get up, and then I couldn't go back to sleep. And so I stayed up and like tweeted and wrote a story and then went back to bed. But when I got up at 2:30, I was thinking, should I call Paul? Or like his wife is going to kill me if I call him.
No, I think that would have been okay. It's just that no one would have heard it. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
is it just me that thinks this announcement should have happened like 2 years ago when they initially did that partnership?
I just think they weren't ready for that yet. And from the perspective of Nokia, the entire company, I think he had a tough sell for those guys, as Stephen Elop did, just telling them that they were going to, we're going to adopt Windows Phone as our primary strategy moving forward. I think that was a tough sell enough. That company had not fallen hard enough yet to understand that a sale would probably be necessary. I think those are things that you have to get to that point. They were still the company that thought it was on top of the mobile industry in some ways, right? They figured, well, we've had a little blip, but we'll just rebound and come right back. And obviously that's not what happened, but I'm sure that's where they were 2 years ago.
Let me ask you both this question. Nokia still has like dummy phones in emerging markets. What happens to that?
I don't think they're called dummy phones.
What do they call it? One is smart, one is
Asha line.
Well, you mean like the 5? No, they have those
Asha.
other phones, like the 101 or whatever. They
Yeah,
are.
it's like
And then
a
the
regular phone. It's like for normal people.
Right.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, they
happens?
still have those.
What happens to that?
Microsoft gets all that.
Okay.
My understanding is that starting on December 31st, 2015, Nokia can start making phones again if they want. They can start anew.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening, but I guess they could if they wanted to.
Yeah. I think it's going to be super interesting to see what they do with those Asha phones, what Microsoft does, because they don't run Windows Phone operating system. They run the Asha operating system. And
Yep.
I don't think they can run Windows Phone unless Microsoft did some very much light version of the Windows Phone OS. But they are going to run, I bet, the same many of the same services that run across Microsoft phones, tablets, the Xbox. So they're going to try to bring people in who are running feature phones, hook them on the services, and then get them to upgrade to the smartphone at some point if they can.
So that, by the way, I'm positive you're right. But some people have asked me on Twitter, and I think this is a good question, how a $100 no contract Windows Phone device doesn't satisfy the low end of the market. Is there some...
Well, in
other
some
math that-
countries, in some countries, like in India where Asha is really big, the internet can be very spotty, right? So you have to kind of design phones thinking that you may not always be on, but you need to access things through different means,
Right.
So that's one of the constraints you have if you're trying to develop for that platform.
Paul, right now, who has a $100 no contract Windows phone?
Nokia does. So you can buy a Lumia 520 from AT&T, the Go Phone plan, $99, no contract, and you get a SIM, and you can use it or not use it. It's up to you. It works, fine as like a media device or whatever offline.
See, I think, we talk about what's the advantage that these phones have. I mean, Android controls the market. The iPhone is the iPhone. It has this thing around it. But what can Windows do? Something like that is brilliant. $100 no contract entry-level phone.
Yeah. Well, I guess, okay, but I guess what Mary Jo is saying is that, these other phones obviously can make calls. So in other words, you buy a $99 phone. If you're not paying for contract, you're not doing anything with it. I mean, you can't make phone calls. So I'm sure there is a stepping stone between no phone at all and a smartphone, and maybe that's where the Asha makes a lot of sense, or even those other devices they have. I'm not really fully up on the whole lineup because they don't really, they don't sell them here. I don't even know what they are, but I don't know. All the stuff I've seen about, especially that newest Asha phone, which I want to say is like a 505 or a 500 or whatever. That looks like a sweet little device. I mean, I look at that and I think
the 501.
501. Okay, yeah. That looks nice to me.
Yeah, it's a cool looking phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, is this it? This one, right? 501.
And you can see where it shares kind of the familial look and feel of a Lumia device, and it wouldn't be such a, going from that to a Windows phone wouldn't be difficult from a, this is the thing I carry in my pocket, and this is, I've got some part of my ego wrapped up into the look and feel of this device for some reason.
No, it's great. I mean, they sell them, right? And it works in emerging markets, so why would you shake that up? I just didn't know if they were taking control of that or they were just going to take, certain
Yeah, they're taking all of it.
Yeah. And what's left, you said? Some of the services like the mapping and...
Basically,
it's the mapping.
The mapping services, it's IP, like patent licensing for the remaining patents, and it's their networking business, the Siemens stuff.
Okay.
I think that's basically the rest of Nokia, right? I think that's it.
Right. That's it.
Do you see them keeping a Nokia brand, or are they going to switch it all to Microsoft branded, Surface phones?
That's a good question.
There's some evidence that they're getting rid of the Nokia branding.
I mean, Nokia has never worked in this country. That's a known thing. They've always produced decent phones, but there's nobody buys Nokia products in this country.
Yeah. So actually, that's an interesting point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They licensed the Nokia name for the feature phones, so the Asha phones and the other lower end phones, for 10 years. Microsoft did. So they're going to be able to call those phones Nokia phones, but on the Lumia, I think they're going to probably switch that out to a Microsoft brand, I would think.
Yeah, from Nokia. So if you think about the way the world works as far as smartphones and phones and everything, Nokia is not a big brand here. So putting a Microsoft name on a Lumia is maybe not a big deal. And in Western world, Western countries, probably not a big deal. In the types of markets where they're selling those phones that just have Nokia branding, not Ash's, but the lower, even lower end phones that are just called Nokia and then a number, keeping those as Nokia makes plenty of sense because that's how those phones are known. It's like when people talk about, I need a Kleenex or I need to Xerox something, I need a Nokia. Like in those parts of the world, that name is synonymous with phone. And so I think keeping that brand makes a lot of sense.
See, me, Paul, I like to go by America's Choice. That's the brand that I trust. America's Choice, everything.
I am a driver of IROC Z28s and a drinker of Bud Light.
No, but just regular Budweiser, Paul.
Yes. Oh, but sorry.
Listen, MJ saw what kind of beer I was drinking.
I did.
I was drinking nice, fancy beer.
He did. I can say that.
And MJ drank me under the table. I was done after 2 of these. She was just a pro.
No, you were holding your own, sir.
Yeah, and then I started slurring, and it got a little weird. Much like every other drinking.
It's a sloppy drinker.
I'm not a great drinker at all. I mean, it just hits me immediately, and I just want to go home and cry.
Yeah.
But that would be interesting to see. I mean, Ballmer came out and said that he anticipates that they're going to be shorter names. He almost promised. He's like, well, the phones are going to have shorter names. They're not going to have these, crazy long Windows Phone, Lumia 1020, Windows Phone 8, whatever.
Yeah, I saw something like that. Although I've never seen anyone call a Nokia device like a Nokia Windows Phone Lumia 1020 or so. I don't actually see anyone say that, but
the number branding for Nokia
stink,
is super confusing.
1020, 928,
925,
928.
928. Yeah.
Listen, Surface phones. That's it. That's all we got to do.
Yeah.
Well, I like Lumia. I mean, I wish there was some other way to differentiate these things, but we'll see. Microsoft, the very notion of Microsoft swooping in and saying we're going to fix the branding on this thing is in itself ludicrous. This is the company that can't.
Well, this is the company that came out with Windows RT.
Yeah, sure. Or Microsoft Host Integration Server 2011 or 2.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I mean, sure.
So let's kind of talk about the user confidence and what they could possibly do with this. There's a lot of stuff happening. The only major thing that I feel that works really well as far as branding goes is Xbox, and they've had hiccups here and there, but it is still a solid brand. When it comes to Windows, when it comes to Windows Phone, Windows RT, they're going to have an uphill battle here in the next year with a new CEO. This guy's kind of taken over. Whoever's coming in is taking over this kind of jumbled up mess they have when it comes to user confidence.
Sure.
If I was doing it, I would get rid of the RT brand, call it something else. I, for one, am a big fan of Windows Mobile. I say bring back.
By the way,
I'm being sarcastic for people who can't understand that.
No, to be honest, I've actually thought a lot recently that it's too bad that name is so tainted.
Yeah, it's a good name
because it is a good name for some of the stuff that they're doing, like a Windows tablet. Windows Mobile would be a good name for that, but I think they've destroyed it. I think the name is beyond repair.
Or Surface. I mean, someone says Surface, Surface RT, Surface Pro.
Yeah, but even Surface has been unsuccessful enough that name might be tainted. I mean, I when I got back from I guess it was Build well, whatever. I guess TechEd, whatever the last one was. I guess it was Build. I don't remember it. Build. We got these tablets, and I called a friend of mine ahead of time, and I had offered to buy him one if they were going to be selling them. And then they just gave me one, so I said, "I'll just give him I'll give him the tablet." And so I called him and I said, "I got the tablet," and we set up a meeting and I handed it to him. And as I did, he said, "Hey, this isn't that piece of crap that nobody wants that they took the huge write-off on, is it?" And I was like, "Dude, no, A, no, it's not, but B, I'm giving you this. Who cares? Like, what do you, But it was interesting to me that someone who wasn't into the technology world doesn't know a lot about the stuff." Was still sort of aware of that as a negative thing. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I'm a little worried that Surface might be going the way of Windows Mobile from a brand, or Zune, from like a mobile perspective, from a branding perspective.
But Paul, that said, you've blogged before. I saw that whatever the next two Surfaces are, they're both called Surface, right? Like Surface 2 and Surface 2 Pro, right? So they're going to stick with it through this holiday, it looks like.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. And by the way, and to that point, they're not getting rid of the brand RT for the OS,
right?
But they're not going to use it for the device.
Yeah.
Well, you also have Nokia coming out with a tablet any day now, right? They're doing that whole unveiling. And again,
if they stick with it, none of us have been invited. None of us have still been invited to that.
I mean, if they
by the way,
stick with
this may have been why. Right?
I know. This may have been why. I thought that today, too.
It is a little weird how, everyone seemed to know that this was happening at the end of the month, but no one was getting invited, and no one actually got an invite.
Right.
So
do you see them just canning this?
Nokia's new tablet?
Yeah.
No, I think they're going to come out with it, for sure. I think they built them already, or are building them. But I think it'll be interesting what they call them when they announce them.
Well, I mean, here's the other thing. Now you have the Surface 2 that's going to be coming out, obviously, and you have this Nokia tablet that's coming out. The problem that I had with the Surface is that when it came out, I'm like, you know what? The next one is going to be the one that I want. Now, with this Nokia thing going on, I want the following one.
The Nokia one is RT only, right? So it's not like a Windows 8 tablet. I actually think that eliminates it from contention for a lot of people. But I guess we'll see. I don't know. One of the promises of the Nokia tablet was that they were going to do companion apps that worked across Windows and Windows Phone, and that there would be some cohesive experience there if you had both. And I do think there's a bunch of people who really like Nokia in general and really like the Lumias in particular, and would, be kind of excited by that possibility.
Yeah. Plus, it's going to run, the rumors say it's going to run a Qualcomm processor, not the Tegra, right? So
Right.
that a lot of people were excited about that. Like maybe that would give it more kick and make it more interesting, right?
Yeah, and that's something I know nothing about, the next gen Qualcomm versus Tegra 4, how those things stack up, how they compare to, say Bay Trail or whatever. I have no idea.
I mean, at the end of the day, it really comes down to one thing, and it's battery life, right?
Well,
For
two
most
things:
people.
And power,
battery
too,
life,
right?
and performance. Because I complain a lot about Surface RT, and some people take that really personally because some people own the device and love it, and they think it meets all their needs, and they don't understand why
me?
I'm so down on it. Well, yeah, yes. Although you don't berate me for it regularly, but the one thing that most of these people don't know is that I actually use Surface RT almost every single day. And one thing I've been doing now for weeks, I think I've probably since I got home from Europe, so let's say for 3 weeks or so, is I've been researching new cars and also used cars, but I've been spending a lot of time on car dealership websites. And you go through those configurator things where you say, I want this thing and I want to choose this from this menu. And, that browser on Surface RT on those types of websites performs so poorly and is so scream out loud annoying in its performance, that it's borderline. It's unusable. It's really, really bad. And I hope that the Tegra 4 or the new Qualcomm or whatever solves that kind of thing, because that's real basic stuff. This is not complex arcade game, which, by the way, those things actually run pretty well in RT for whatever reason. But it's the simple stuff. It's those little things that I think destroy the experience for people.
Well, and 8.1 might help some.
Yeah,
We're hoping, and IE 11 maybe. Although I got to tell you, I'm running the customer preview of RT 8.1, and IE 11 on that is pretty bad.
Yeah.
See, I'm a fan of 8.1. I just installed it on a laptop that had 8 that I never touched, and for whatever reason, just knowing that I could just right-click on that little start button and pull up, all the stuff that I want, it's done it for me.
That's
And I'm going in there as someone that kind of gets it, and I can navigate around it with the short keys, but just having that alone that I could right-click has gone a long way for me. Mm-hmm. So, one step closer, I guess.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Well,
a lot.
Don't
a lot,
ask.
A lot could happen.
well, let's see.
With kind of Nokia coming on board now, are we going to see them kind of abandon Surface and go with Nokia as their hardware manufacturer, or are they going to still kind of produce, two separate brands for the time being? This is where it's going to get a little confusing. Do they still need to produce their own Surfaces, or does Nokia produce them?
We don't know.
I always said
that's
Nokia
good
should have
to
been the
know.
one. It should have been Nokia producing the Surface. It was fascinating to me that they didn't.
Nokia is going to be put inside of Microsoft. So in some ways, it doesn't matter what we call it, because that part of Microsoft that makes Surface will no doubt have, because they're part of that devices organization, right? So I would imagine that they're all going to be under the same org. And so I think they will be working on to potentially, people who are Nokia employees today, 6 months from now, will be working on the third Surface or something. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
Yeah, Microsoft this is actually a really interesting number we found out today. Of the 32,000 Nokia employees they're acquiring as part of this, 18,000 of them are in manufacturing. These are people who actually build stuff.
Build things. Right.
Yeah.
You can tell they're not from the United States, because that's something we don't know how to do here.
Right. So, what are they going to be building? They're going to be building phones, right? And maybe tablets.
Maybe
because
laptops.
right now, we think the people who are building the Surface tablets are a combination of Foxconn and Compal, like these OEMs, like original design manufacturers Microsoft's used. They've never actually come out and said who's building those Surfaces.
Maybe laptops. My dream will come true.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
You and me both.
Give these OEMs a run for their money. You know what? Put out the epitome of what a Windows laptop should be. Sell it. have it. I'm sure it's not going to be an inexpensive product. It's probably going to compete with a MacBook Pro. But kind of set the example as this is what a $1,000 laptop should be. Forget about all this crap that you're putting on there. Forget about, again, the awful touchpad on this thing. Make it what it's supposed to be. Apple's successful for many reasons, but one of the reasons why I like their MacBooks is because they control the product and everything. Yeah. And I like the trackpad, I like the keyboard, so it works for me. I think with Microsoft, when you go and buy a Windows laptop, you get a different experience on every one of these laptops, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. No, you're right.
I'd buy a Nokia book or a Lumia book or whatever, right?
A Lumia Book Pro.
The one, we're going to be debating Surface for years to come, but they have moved into this market so deliberately and so slowly that it's almost comical. And they'll arrange major announcements that I, as someone who writes news stories, has trouble understanding the import of. Surface expands to new distribution possibilities through, you kind of fall asleep reading them. They're crazy. I hope that this acquisition jumpstarts this stuff and both gets them into this more quickly and gets them to expand their offerings more quickly, assuming they ever intended to expand it. Because, replacing whatever it is that's out in the world. If you go to Best Buy today and they have a bunch of Dells and HPs and Samsungs or whatever they have there with equivalent beautiful Microsoft Surface devices is a pleasant fantasy, but those things don't exist. So, they need to make all those devices. And I don't know if they really want to. I don't know. They seem intent on just doing here's something that's like what Apple does. And I just don't think that's enough.
Following the Apple model, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Apple makes a 10-inch iPad. Here's a 10-inch Surface. Nice.
Yeah, where Microsoft, where they can, in theory, beat and compete against iPad, against the MacBook, is in services, right? If they really could harness all the services they have, like Xbox Live and Bing and SkyDrive and Outlook.com and everything, and then integrate it with the Here mapping technology. And they had a really compelling bundle, Xbox Music, Xbox Video, if they ever get those fixed. It would be really cool. It would give them something that I think Apple doesn't really have and that Google doesn't really have. I mean, they both have some services, but Microsoft actually has more and more of a variety. But they need to get it so all of these things work across all their devices and that there's a reason if you're somebody with multiple different kinds of Windows devices that you would want to go with the Microsoft services because it would carry over across your devices. So I think they need to really push that message. And it sounded from today's conference call like that is the strategy. This is where they think they can actually have something that's a differentiator.
Well, they have 90-something% of the PC market. They should technically have an advantage when it comes to tablets and phones, considering, they control the PC market and everybody has a PC.
Not as much anymore.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm waiting. I'm trying to get more details on this, but one of the things I learned from a source at Microsoft recently was that the top two applications on Windows today, and by this I mean the top two desktop applications, are Chrome and iTunes in that order. And both of those products exist, at least in part, to create a platform that is not Microsoft's platform and to take users away from Microsoft, right? They are their own worlds. They're designed to get you to go do something else. And that has to be a little scary. And I guess for those people who are kind of going kicking and screaming into this mobile computing future and want nothing to do with Metro and nothing to do with Windows RT, the thing that they need to understand is that this desktop thing that they're holding on to, I think it was lost. I think it's already over,
In what way, Paul?
Because you cannot name a major new application developed for Windows over the past couple of years. All of the major new apps have appeared either on the web or on mobile devices. Win32 is not a thing anymore. It's a legacy interface that that we support with apps we've already created. That there's not going to be the next great new app is not going to be on Win32. So if Microsoft can't make Metro successful, that means they lost. It's over because there is nothing else.
It's going to be hard because I think this was 2 weeks ago. We were talking about why are some people able to pick up an iPad and not complain about the changes, but they're picking up
Yeah,
Windows and they're like, oh my God, this is different. I can't use this. It's because you're kind of giving people the option, right? And that was their initial thing. Well, we're going to put it in here and this is going to be their UI. We're going to force them, but they don't want that because it's still branded the same. It's still Windows. So
it is a weird bit of psychology. I'm talking at I'm speaking next week in Boston. And it's sort of the subject of the talk. Why is it that no one ever reviewed the iPad, not even once, and said, wow, this thing would be great if it just had a start menu on it. But when you pick up Windows 8, it's all people ever complain
because they never
about.
had it.
And
it's
it's
something
crazy.
new.
For some reason, making that transition to a new device is no problem at all. But Microsoft, by giving you the best of both worlds and providing both kinds of things in one package, that's a huge problem.
It's the same thing. I mean, you one little change and you freak out, but if you go into a new house and it has that new feature, you love it. I mean, that's kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
I think that's been their problem, and it's kind of hard. Maybe if they had separated it for some time and their tablet business was their tablet business and the desktop had a different operating system, people would have been more inclined to try it out and say, oh, wow, this is really cool. I wish this was in Windows. But
someday soon, Apple's going to release a product that's called the iBook, and they're going to repurpose this name they used to use for something that is an iOS laptop that is like an iPad with a keyboard built in, and they're going to be applauded for it. And I don't know, maybe that maybe they were right to go that way. This is one of those things that in retrospect it makes all kinds of sense. It's hard to know as it's happening what the best approach is, but. I don't know. So far, I don't know. I just see a lot of grumbling on the Windows side.
I don't know why, too. I mean, I have my issues with Windows 8, but it's not as awful as people make it out to be. And
Which is a great tagline, by the way.
I know. I mean,
not as awful as you think it is.
But isn't that something? I mean, I use technology, and the way that I convince people, they're like, oh, yeah, I got this laptop and it's Windows. I'm like, yeah, but it's not as awful as people are making it out to be.
It sucks, but it's not as bad as you think.
Yeah. Well, it's the Vista problem,
Yeah, it is.
And this is like SP1. Windows 8.1 is SP1, and by that time it was better. It was working the way it's supposed to work, but people had already had this image in their heads of what it was, and no matter how many times you did Project Mojave and put that ad out, it didn't matter because it was still Vista.
Right.
I honestly thought they should have just rebranded that thing, called it Mojave, and just put it out there as the same exact thing.
Yeah, it probably would have done great.
It would have done great. Oh my God, this Mojave, it's amazing. I want it. Let's wrap it up, guys. I know Paul is out of it. He has so much to do. He messaged me this morning. He goes, I don't know how I'm going to deal with today. This was the last thing I wanted.
I've been giving Mary Jo updates on my mouse all day long.
I know.
Every time I knock the mouse on the floor, I write Mary Jo.
What's wrong with the mouse?
There's something about this new mouse. I knock it on the floor. Like I've knocked it on the floor 4 times today. And when you knock it on the floor, it doesn't just bounce on the floor like a baseball, although it does do that. It explodes into 4 pieces, and then you have to go find the pieces and put them back together again so you can get back to work.
What mouse are you using?
It's that new Microsoft mouse that comes with the Sculpt Comfort keyboard set. See, it looks like a baseball.
Oh my God! Look at that thing.
It's pretty nice, but yeah.
I don't know. It's like a weird combination of tall and light. So my hand kind of it must brush it, and because it's so light, it just goes careening off the side of the desk or of the drawer here.
I'm still using like a PS2 mouse on my computer.
Yeah,
has a Gateway logo. I've never owned a Gateway in my life. It has a Gateway logo on it.
Nice.
Oh man,
I'm all about legacy. You can follow Paul on Twitter @TheRot. Of course, Mary Jo Foley, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me again.
Fellow New Yorker, fellow beer lover. You can follow her on Twitter, Mary Jo Foley on Twitter. Of course, ZDNet, articles everywhere. Every day I'm seeing people tweeting your articles. You can follow me on Twitter @AndrewZarian. Little reminder, guys, if you want to help out the GFQ network and you want to help me buy mice.
Buy a new mouse that uses
buy a new mice.
slightly newer than PS2.
If you want me to buy a mouse from, I don't know, the 2000s, we have an Amazon affiliate program here at the network. All you got to do is click on the little Amazon link on the side of the window or go to gfq.co/Amazon. And we got a little credit, a couple % here and there, 5%, 4%, whatever it is on your sales. It helps us out a lot. And I could continue doing this and working from home. Paul, Mary Jo, thank you again for doing this. This was a groundbreaking announcement today about Nokia being purchased by Microsoft.
Well, I mean, obviously, it wasn't as big as Google's announcement that they're going to codename their next Android version something different. And not as big as the fact that Apple apparently is going to have a press conference next week. But, yes, it was easily the third largest story of the day.
By the way, Paul, do you think they're paying licensing for that KitKat name?
No, because they're Google, and I hope they get in trouble for that.
I'm curious about that. How much of are they paying licensing to whatever company that owns KitKat? Mars
Nestle.
or one of them?
It's Nestle.
Nestle.
There's no way. There is.
You
no
don't
way.
think so?
I thought I saw somebody say they are. No?
They
I hope
have
they
to
are.
be. I'm.
What a stupid. That is the
What a waste.
stupidest naming convention I've ever seen ever. Ever.
KitKat.
Even the cat thing made more sense.
Well, key lime pie. Forget about that. Nobody likes key lime pie, but a Kit Kat, everybody knows what a Kit Kat is. I'm hoping they're spending like $100 million. They're just wasting away on
I
the
hope they're
brand
not,
Kit Kat.
and they get sued and they lose in court. That would be even better.
What's the next one going to be? Let's just go with known like Snickers and
Sure.
Baby Ruth, whatever.
Reese's Pieces.
Reese's Butterfinger. Let's just go backwards. It's endless. Skittles.
Skittles.
Twix. People are saying Twix in the chat room.
Twix.
Yeah. So with an L. Oh, the next one is with an L. So what begins with an L?
Things like this briefly
Laffy Taffy.
remind me that it's okay covering Microsoft.
Laffy Taffy. That's going to be the next version of Apple, Android, and Apple, of course. September 10th. Huge groundbreaking announcement. The next iPhone announcement is going to be September 10th, which I will be covering. I will sit here and ooh and ah about every Apple product, and then Paul's going to just message me and tell me I'm a fool.
Next Tuesday is going to be the day that Apple takes a rainbow-colored dump on the rest of the tech industry. I just so tired of this.
Mary
So
Jo, are you
tired.
going to buy a MacBook Pro?
No.
Okay. We had that whole discussion.
Although,
when you
no,
were
we
here.
did. We
Mary
talked
Jo
about
has
that.
got to be due for a new laptop.
I am really overdue for a new laptop.
Yeah.
And man, I am really hoping October 18th I'm going to see something I want, if not sooner, because so far I have not.
Paul, after
like-
the show, MJ and I went out for a drink, and the entire time she was drinking, I kept trying to convince her to go buy a MacBook Pro.
He did.
Right.
The entire time, I was like, you know what you should buy? You should buy a MacBook Pro, and
You
forget
should-
about
did you,
forget
but
about a
did you
camera.
go far enough? Did you say something like, listen, I'll walk over there with you right now to the Apple Store?
Yeah, we could just go buy right now. No, I was telling him, like, and here's the great thing. You get the MacBook Pro, you buy an iPad, you don't need a camera anymore. You just use the iPad as your camera.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, after about 5 beers, that sounded like a good idea.
That sounds like a great idea. The little red horns kind of like come up out of his head as he was talking.
Forget about the MacBook Pro. Just travel. Forget about the iPad. Travel with the MacBook Pro. Get one of those Mac apps where you could take a picture and just use Photo Booth and just snap pictures. Just hold the laptop up and just
that
snap
was
pictures.
fantastic.
That'll be the day.
Sure.
All right, guys. We'll see you all next week on What the Tech. I want to thank MJ again for coming on as a special guest today. And we'll be back. See you next time.